Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to another BIA Advisory Services and Sales Fuel webinar. Today's topic is about the top recession-proof opportunities for 2023. My name is Patrick Buno. I'm a marketing manager with BIA Advisory Services, and I'll be running the webinar for you today. So we're going to go ahead and give everyone else a few more minutes to get on and settled. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to quickly go through a couple housekeeping items. I'd like to remind everybody today that we are recording today's webinar. So all registered attendees will be receiving an email from us probably sometime tomorrow with links to the on-demand version of the webinar, as well as a PDF of the slide deck. So keep a lookout for that. If at any time during today's webinar you experience any technical difficulties, please email us at webinars@bia.com. We have staff that is standing by monitoring that email that can assist you. And then finally, we'd just like to encourage everyone to be interactive in today's webinar. If at any time you have a question, please just go ahead and type it in your questions box on your GoToWebinar panel. We have a poll coming up soon we'd like you guys kind of participate in so we get a feel of where you guys are thinking. And then also at the very end of the webinar, if you could just stay on for a minute and just fill out a quick survey, let us know what you thought of today's webinar so that we can try to be better prepared for future webinars. So I think with that, we're going to go ahead and get things started here. I'm going to hand things over to one of the moderators for today's session, the VP of Communications for Sales Fuel, Audrey Strong. Audrey, take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. Great working with you again. And everyone, thank you for attending. We're so glad you're here today. I am Audrey Strong. I'm the Vice President of Communications at Sales Fuel, moderating the discussion today. Our panel today, C. Lee Smith, the founder and CEO of Sales Fuel, and for BIA Advisory Services, we have Nicole Ovadia, Vice President of Forecasting and Analysis, and Layla Chadi, a Senior Media Analyst. Now, for today's discussion, while I run through the agenda, Patrick, let's go ahead and put up the poll for you. While I review the agenda, go ahead and answer the poll question. The question is, what do you believe will happen with the U.S. economy next year? Will it be strong? Will it be flat compared to this year? Will it be a very mild recession? Or a potentially bad recession? We'd like to hear your opinion on this. Today's discussion, while you're filling in your answers, will be across these elements: consumers in this recession, local ad forecasts. We'll look at business verticals. We're going to talk a little bit about consumer research, sales tactics, and we also have a list of solutions and tools from both of our companies, BIA Advisory Services and Sales Fuel. So I want to ask the panel, while we're waiting just a couple seconds more for folks to fill in their vote, what do you all think? What's your vote? Nicole, you want to start things off?
Ooh, that's a very loaded question. I don't know if I can give that away. Honestly, I am a glass half full kind of person, and even here at BIA, I think I'm known as the optimist, if you will. So I honestly think that it's going to be flat to grow. I really think it'll grow, but that's me.
Oh, well, let's see.
Yeah, and for me, it's like for me, the answer is it depends. There's so many things that are changing, even as of this morning, with the Fed announcing that they're going to slow down increases in interest rates, and private businesses then actually cutting back the number of new hires that they're making. Just news this morning changes the outlook a little bit, and this is happening on a daily basis. So it really is. It depends, and so I would either I would either be between it's going to be flat or a very mild recession. I agree with most of the attendees here on the webinar.
We've got smart attendees because this poll result dovetails President Biden calling it a slight recession. Remember when he said that? And I remember kind of heard that on CNN and I was like, a slight recession, but you guys agree. So very interesting. Thanks for voting. We appreciate it. All right, so let's get this party started. I want to turn things over to Mr. Smith. Lee, take it away.
You know, Audrey, you mentioned what President Biden said. I'm reminded of what my late father used to say. My dad used to say that a recession is when your neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose your job. So we're nowhere near a depression, obviously. And the idea of a recession is certainly, it's not a certainty. So we look at two different things in this. Is like we look at CEOs and the chief executive CEO confidence index is something that we look at here. And so when we look at what the CEOs have to say, they have mixed outlooks. 43%, which is pretty close to what our poll showed, oddly enough, say that they're bracing for a slowdown. 29% are anticipating conditions to start improving again. So those are the optimists. 28% expect a little change. And so the common thread that you're going to hear from both Nicole and I today pretty much is that if you're an optimist, well, there's stats for you where to be optimistic about. If you're a pessimist, well, there's stats for you to be pessimistic about. So that's the world in which we're living in right now. But there's a little nuance to this. It's not just economic conditions. Let's go to the next slide. This same confidence index, and the latest data here is from November. Let's take a look at increasing in hiring. This is not jobs in general. This is the increase in hiring. And you can see that 47% still plan to increase hiring in 2023, whereas 38% say, well, we're just going to stay with what we got, and 16% say they're going to cut back on hiring. So, yeah, to me, so there is an increase in hiring being planned by the nation's CEOs. But the other thing that we look at, we don't just look at all CEOs, because that can be skewed more toward big business. So we also look at small business, because these are the people, the local decision makers that we typically call on in media sales. Let's go to the next slide. And so we take a look at the National Federation of Independent Businesses, and they have a small business optimism index. 41% of small business owners say they expect the economy to be somewhat worse over the next 6 months. Again, pretty close to what we have here. By far and away, their biggest concern and the biggest thing that's holding small business back is inflation. So again, what that tells you is that if inflation gets under control, then the optimism of small businesses skyrockets from there. And their second biggest problem right now is filling open jobs. So much so that they've kind of given up on expanding their companies. They're just doing well to try to find people to fill open jobs. Matter of 46% more small business owners have current job openings than everybody else. So as far as the small business owners. So that's the situation which we live on, and both with major CEOs and with small business owners. Let's take a look at how the consumers feel about this. Let's go to the next slide here. And so here's a poll or a survey that was done, 3,402 adults. Now this was again back in late August, but it's like still this still resonates. Steps Americans are taking to prepare for a possible recession. Delaying major purchases like a home or a car, 34%. Paying down debt, planning to reduce holiday spending. Well, they may have planned to reduce holiday spending, but that didn't work out very well, because if you look at the stats from the past holiday weekend or whatever, they went out and they spent. Allocating more income to savings, and then, I reminded of the Meatloaf song. It's like, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Well, they would do anything for recession, but they won't do this. They will not stay in a job that they don't enjoy. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about recruitment through today's webinar. But Nicole, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to you, because well, before we do, there's one point that I want to make. Patrick, next slide. And this is something for you to keep in mind, particularly the sales managers of the group. It's like, this would be the first recession. Let's go ahead and go back to that last slide, Patrick. This would be the first recession for many media salespeople. Anybody that's under the age of 32, for example, this is their first time selling in a recession. Some of us have been through 3, maybe even 4 recessions. So we're going to share some of our knowledge based on what has happened in recessions past and how that's affected then media sales. So with that in mind, Nicole, go ahead and let's hear your take then on the economy and how that then impacts ad spend.
Thanks, Lee. I really appreciate it. First of all, thank you for, I'm so glad to be here with you guys again and doing another a webinar like this, because 2022, 2023, it's been interesting. As you can see, when I'm looking at everything, kind of just wanted to summarize a little bit of what Lee had just talked about. What's going on in 2023? When we sit down to do our forecasting, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of different factors. And some are positive and some are negative. So on the negative side, what we've been seeing and what we're looking at is the near-term economic uncertainty. I mean, that goes right back to the poll that we did at the top of this webinar. There is uncertainty in the near term. We are unsure of where things are going. And as Lee alluded to, Powell just earlier today, not even, I don't know, 2-3 hours ago, not even, mentioned and alluded to the fact that the Fed probably won't raise interest rates quite as high next time. So already that is an early indicator that the Fed feels, at least, that they are tempering the inflationary issues and concerns that are out there. So they're still going to raise interest rates. So we're not done, but they won't raise interest rates quite as high as, potentially quite as high as what they have in the past. The market's very excited by that. We've already seen a nice pop today. And so if that continues, then there's a negative rising interest rates that moves over to my positive column. Along those lines, other things that we're worried about in 2023, the auto supply chain issues still plague us. The war in Ukraine still becomes a problem in terms of supply chain issues, not just in the auto side. And the tech layoffs are things that we hear about. You know, when people are getting fired at some of these tech companies, it's noted. But I'm not so concerned about that, because on the other side of things, we have a very strong employment market. There are 2 open jobs for every 1 person currently looking, which is very healthy market. Corporate profits are higher than they have ever been in many cases. And in a lot of places, wages are rising. All of those are very positive economic indicators. There is longer term optimism, and there are some supply chain issues that are starting to ease, especially on the retail side. I'm starting to see a lot of clothing, not so much the high-end luxury, but the economy clothing lines. Supply chain issues seem to be easing, and they're having a relatively strong season. Another positive that's not on this slide because it literally just happened is the wonderful weekend we had in terms of retail sales over the weekend, between Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and even Giving Tuesday, off the charts and higher than anybody expected, which is indicating a healthy holiday season, which again indicates a more healthy economy than some people had been thinking in the recent past. So all that being said, what does that mean? We put it all together, we put it in our models, and we talk about it, and we come up with our local forecast for 2023 is going to be 165.7 billion. This represents about flat compared to 2022. If we take political out of the picture, then that would show about 4.5–5% growth. So what I really like to look at on this slide, and I keep my eyes on, is the split between traditional and digital. So right now, digital is a little under half of the total US local ad revenue that will be spent in 2023. Had you looked at our forecast a year ago, the 2023 forecast, when we were doing it in November of 2021, we were expecting digital to actually overtake traditional and get to about the 51% of the total spend. But over the course of the last year, there have been some issues with some privacy cookie issues with Apple and Android devices. That's tempered a little bit of the advertising market. And in general, some of the tech companies and whatnot have slowed their projections. I mean, Meta, especially Facebook, some of their revenue projections were a little bit tempered compared to previous. So digital is continuing to grow and growing very quickly and faster than traditional, but not quite as much as quickly as it had been in the last year or two. We'll come back to that and talk about it a little bit more, but just I wanted to show that in terms of where we're headed, I expected 2025 digital will take over traditional media in terms of representative dollars. And then on the next slide, we'll dive in a little bit deeper. I always like to show this, especially in a webinar like this. There's a lot of different people here, and you're all sitting in very different seats. And if I myself were an account executive at a television station anywhere in the country, this slide is actually very interesting. What I see from this slide is that, take a look at that direct mail line. So the direct mail, the amount of money being spent on local advertising on direct mail in 2023 will be over $37 billion. And on TV over the air, that's going to be $16.2 billion. The other thing to note about direct mail is that it is getting more expensive. That is growing because the expenses are growing. It's getting more expensive to both print direct mail and also to place the advertising and also to send that direct mail. So all of those costs are going up. So as somebody in another sector, say radio, television, newspaper, anybody else, I think it is an opportunity in 2023 in the recession when people are, or potential recession, excuse me, when people are worried about their costs. I think it is worthwhile to take a look at who's spending money on direct mail in your local market and go after those guys. See if you can grab some dollars out of that piece of the pie. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about verticals. So here we are. We're here for this webinar because we want to talk about what verticals are recession-proof. So how do we get there? So the one thing I will say about a recession, whether or not we have one, is that they're all different. The reasons why we're in a recession are all very different. And especially if we do go into one in the next few months, the pandemic is different than any other recession that we've ever walked into. So when we were sitting down and figuring out what's recession proof, the answer is nothing is quote recession proof, because every recession is different. So what we wanted to do was sit down here and talk about, okay, there's a filter. First, we need to talk about verticals that are big enough, that they're spending enough dollars. It doesn't really matter if a vertical is going to double in size over the next year, if that is going from $100 to $200, still not worth any of your time. So we want to talk about verticals that are important and that are sizable and also are projected to grow in the next year. So that's the filter that we have. And with that filter, we came up with 5 really exciting verticals and sub-verticals within that for account executives, sellers, executives, everybody to keep an eye on in the next year. Those are education, health, finance and insurance, auto repair, and technology. Plus, we got a few honorable mentions at the end. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to pass it over to Layla, who's going to, I'm going to pass it back to Lee, who's going to introduce the first subvertical of education, and then Layla's going to be the one to take you through the real dollars and the meat that when we get to that. So Lee, why don't I pass it over to you and talk a little bit about education? You're on mute.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So let's talk about education specifically. I mean, education is a very broad category. Let's talk about the subcategory of colleges and universities where we see the most opportunities. So let's go to the next slide and get started. We want to start off with each of these sections in by talking about the market trends. And so I put together 4 of them for you. And of course, Nicole's going to chime in then as well with her thoughts along the way. So first and foremost with colleges and universities. By the way, that's campus green there of my alma mater and Audrey's alma mater, Ohio University, by the way, in the picture. So had to get that in there. So colleges and universities are offering more certificate programs right now to engage with students who don't see the value in traditional 4-year degree. And we're seeing this because, do I really need a college degree to be able to land a really good job? And so, and the cost of it and the student debt that comes along with that. So certificate programs and alternative ways of showing that that you've learned subject matter and everything like that are becoming increasingly important. The market is more competitive, so they're being more flexible about admissions than to bring in more students. So they can no longer be quite as stringent because they need to get bodies in chairs in classrooms. 24% of Black Americans, 21% of Hispanic Americans say that they are more likely to apply at schools with a test optional policy. So that's the ACT, SAT, and everything like that. And it's like, yeah, you don't really need to take it. Let's take a look at your grades and everything like that. And so that's another thing that may be happening then in many colleges, universities. And of course, that's something that needs to be promoted and advertised. And then another category of consumer then that needs to be targeted here are active service members as well as veterans. They're a potentially lucrative market, mostly for trade schools, but also for-profit colleges through the GI Bill. So those are some of the things that we're seeing market trends for colleges and universities.
And
so
Lee,
Layla, yeah, go ahead.
Jump in real quick here. One of the things, the reason why I'm so excited about college and universities for the next year, it dovetails into the strength of the employment market. So the fact that there are so many open jobs means that there are a lot of opportunities out there for people looking to advance their own education. So I'm really looking at the secondary, that adult education classes, night classes. I really think there's going to be a pop of those kind of advertising because people want to give themselves the skill set they need to move up to a higher paying position. And also a lot of the recruiters and people who are looking to fill empty spots are willing to put you through the training necessary for the job. So again, that dovetails into the colleges and universities, trade school programs, all of those, adult education, continuing education, going to be big in 2023. Employers and employees looking to advance and to be part of that.
And when both of us and I've been taking a look at the Great Resignation and what is the real problem there with the labor shortage in the job market, one of the things that pops out a little bit are the folks in the mid to late 20s are not, percentage-wise, are not in the job market as much as they have been in the past. Some of the thinking there is that many of them are staying in college and getting graduate degrees. So we're seeing an increase in that. So that's good for colleges and universities because they need to advertise that as well. So another opportunity. So
sure.
Layla, let's go ahead and let's hear about how colleges and universities, let's take a look at ad spend for them.
Thank you, Lee. Hi, everyone. So let's look at the numbers now. Education vertical overall is expected to spend $1.7 billion in 2023, and 31.4% of it is expected to go to digital advertising. Now, if you look at the right-hand side, the #1 spot for share of wallet will go to direct mail with 29.4%. and is closely followed by TV OTA. As you can see, a lot of the money goes there with 15%. On the next slide, we are looking at the top spender within this category, and that would be colleges and universities. They're expected to spend $938 million in 2023, and roughly about 32% of that will go to digital advertising. Now you can see that is an expected 8.4% increase overall in spending for colleges and universities from 22 to 23, so pretty good. And then a slight decrease of almost 3% from 23 to 24 in this subcategory. Next slide, back to you, Lee.
Yes, and we also want to share with you a little bit of insight about the audiences in each of these sub-verticals. So this comes from our audience scan study of U.S. consumer behavior, 15,500 adults online. And this particular profile, we take a look at college tuition buyers, people who say that they intend to pay for college tuition either for themselves or for someone in their family. And 41% of this group say they've responded to ads on a social network in the past 30 days. And so responded in this case or have taken action means that they've been to the website, they've made a phone call, they've gone to a store, they've researched something on Google. So they've taken action after seeing an ad. 44% of this group say that online reviews, they take a look at them, but they must be recent, meaning in the past 3 months to influence their decision. And also it's important to note that 11% of this group also intend to pay for tutoring services. I'm doing the same thing for my son in college right now. So it's not just the college, but also paying for the tutoring as well. So Audrey, back to you.
Okay, so the format, folks, just enter your questions in. We already have some general questions that have come in. Any questions not answered live today, we will answer post-webinar. So never fear, our team will answer everybody's questions. We do have a question about the education vertical, though. Tori asks, do you break down what is considered part of the 31.9% digital? Who'd like to take a swing at that?
Oh, sure. I can jump in there. Yes, we do.
Right.
What you mean, I think what you're asking about how we break it down, we do break it down, the digital spending by platform a little more specifically, and we do have further reports, so we'll talk about that later. But if you wanted more detail about how that spending is going to, where it's going to fall in what markets and what within digital, we can absolutely provide all of that. So just reach out to advantage@bia.com. and we'll be happy to send to talk to you about more details.
Perfect. So let's move on, and we've got to get through a bunch of stuff. I want to make sure we get out of here on time. Let's go to our next vertical, which is healthcare.
Yeah, so this is healthcare. So one particular part of healthcare which we're taking a look at right now is hospitals. So let's go to the next slide and jump right into it. So telehealth is a major focus for hospitals these days. That's something that started from the pandemic, but it's especially true though in rural areas. So rural hospitals are going to be advertising, promoting their telehealth. Staff shortages continue to be a major challenge. Matter of fact, I mean, they're still losing people just because of the rigors of the job. Many are actively marketing hiring incentives to attract employees. So this is another area where you wouldn't think of this being something that you would advertise during a recession, but this is, as Nicole said, every recession is different, and this is certainly one aspect of it. Consumerization of healthcare means that more hospitals are starting to become more transparent about prices for procedures, and they're marketing the availability of this information because it then make them stand apart then from other hospitals that are kind of keeping that information close to the vest as they've done traditionally. And as patients search online to self-diagnose their conditions, hospitals who turn up with content in the SEO results, in the search engine results, will be the ones to get the clicks and to be the ones to get the business. Nicole, what's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that final bullet just cracks me up because that's, my mom calling me 47 times a day with this is, and now I have this and that. And my brother is a doctor, a medical doctor. The other one's a PhD.
And she calls you
doctor by my name, and yet I'm the one that gets the call. I don't understand.
Dr. Google.
But anyway, yeah, Google will be the fourth child in our family. I'll be happy to pass that along. But when I'm looking at healthcare in general, yeah, what am I excited about in 2023? Well, I mean, it actually does kind of dovetail, or goes along with what I was just talking about. In the US, we have an aging population, for sure. Everybody knows that. And there's a lot of government incentives coming out around helping care for your elderly parents, whatever relatives, in their own home, and paying relatives and friends to do that. And so I think we're going to see a lot of spending in 2023, some issue spending, some government and political. So it might not all fall under the hospital umbrella, but they're all going to be related in this field, informing people of the government incentives of helping, to care for your parents in their home, and that home health care, the home health nurse, and that kind of thing. So for 2023, I think we're going to see a jump in that spending, along with some of this hospital that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. Home health care and elder care services. Absolutely. So Layla, tell us about how this impacts ad spending.
Surely. So in the next slide, we are looking at the healthcare vertical overall. It is expected to spend $13 billion in 2023, which 36.2% of it will go to digital advertising. Now you can see again on the right-hand side, the #1 spot in share of wallet will go to direct mail, so a lot of money in direct mail. And then TV OTA is about 14% out of the share of wallet. And if we look at the subvertical that will be spending the most, and that will be hospitals. Next slide, please. Hospitals is expected to spend $4.76 billion in 2023. Now, almost 39% of it will go to digital advertising. Now, you can see that even there will be an increase of 10.5% year over year in 2023, so that's pretty good, and with a slight decrease by 2024 of 3.5% year over year. So we'll get into a little bit more about this in the next slide with Lee. Thank you.
So let's talk about the audience. In this case, we look at healthcare patients. So on our AdMall service, which most of you who are on this webinar use, we have over 440 different types of subverticals, which is what BIA calls them. And so we've gone over some of those with hospitals and the like, and you'll hear more about that. But also then from the audience scan, we have over 1,300 different audience profiles. So I want to share with you bits from 3 of them. 39% of healthcare services patients, which are people who intend to pay for healthcare services in the next 12 months, say that they already have a name in mind when they begin to search for a business online. So it's not just a matter of they have a condition, they're going to go Google something like that. They've already got a name in mind, and that's where traditional advertising and other forms of digital marketing then come into play. 38% of cardiology patients have asked physicians about medications after seeing pharmaceutical ads, whether it be on television or in print elsewhere. 25% of oncology patients, which by the way, the vast majority of these folks are 65 plus, prefer to read newspapers and magazines in print rather than read them online. So some food for thought there. Audrey, take it away.
We have a question from Tracy. She said, why are both the education and healthcare verticals going back down in 2024?
Great question. Yes, I was hoping somebody would ask that, because I was trying to find the right time to pipe in with that. So both of those are going down in 2024. There's a couple of things going on there. First of all, 2024 is going to be a huge political year throughout the entire year. The primaries are going to be huge. The actual election is going to be huge. So I am forecasting a lot of political crowd out, which is affecting some of the other verticals and subverticals. But honestly, what's really happening with these 2 that you just saw, and you'll probably see for the next 3, because we're expecting such enormous growth, if you will, year over year, this is kind of like that reset. So especially for education, I think there's an opportunity right here in education, given how strong the labor market is. I don't know if that labor market's going to last into 2024, but I am confident it's going to be strong in 2023. So I kind of tempered things back down a little bit in 2024, that, the labor market might not be quite the 2-to-1 ratio. It might be a 1.5-to-1 ratio. And therefore, the spending associated with education might get tempered a little bit as well. And in what we just saw, again, it's just kind of that reset of 2023 is to really get all of that demand back, and then 2024 is settling back down a little bit along with the political crowd out. So you'll see a large jump in 23 and then a little bit of a shift back. It is just a settling, if you will.
Interesting. All right, let's move on to finance and insurance.
So in this particular vertical, we're taking a look mostly at auto and direct property insurance. And so what's interesting about this, let's go to the next slide. What's interesting about this is one of the categories in where you don't see recruitment and labor shortages and everything like that. There are enough insurance agents apparently on the market. That's a joke, I don't know. So the insurance market is currently in what they call a hard market, which means that there's high demand for insurance coverage and low appetite to insure. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you bought a property in a floodplain. You need insurance, but the insurance companies don't want to insure you because they know there's a high possibility that there's going to be a claim. That's an example of a hard market. But overall, we're in a hard market. That's what they consider it to be. Large insurers like Nationwide Insurance, for example, just recently did this, are releasing their locally based captive agents in order to cut costs. So what happens is that these agents now become independent agents and they can sell whatever they want. To their advantage, they're continuing to thrive because they can now offer a competitive mix of policies from all kinds of different carriers and then play one against the other than to do what's in the best interest of their customer. So these insurance agents, these independent agents are making gains by selling supplemental products such as liability for pet ownership, small business ownership, small businesses that need cyber protection. So all kinds of supplemental insurances and everything like that are also being sold by independent agents that represent an opportunity for advertising. Nicole, what are your thoughts on this?
So many thoughts. First of all, liabilities for pet ownership. I know what you mean there is like a dog bite, but I have 2 cats and I'm sitting here like, yeah, I definitely need some like extra insurance just to take care of these guys and the mental health and the mental wearing. But anyway, on the insurance side, what I will say, the reason why, well, I'm going to go back on what I said a little bit earlier, where I said there's no such thing as something that's recession proof. Insurance is recession proof because you have to have it. I mean, no matter what happens with inflation and whatnot, auto insurance is not optional for the majority of people in the United States. But the thing is, you don't need to be loyal to your insurance company. So I think that first bullet right there is that we are in a high demand for insurance and there's a low appetite to insure, but there is not a lot of loyalty when it comes to auto insurance and home insurance. People are willing to change, and as their wallets get tighter, they are more and more willing to change their insurance companies to save a couple of bucks. And so I do think we're going to see some more competitiveness in the among the potential insurance clients that are more attractive to the insurance companies than less attractive. So I guess that's my polite way of saying Florida, they're not really going to be fighting over the people that want to be insured in Florida because nobody wants to insure houses that are likely to flood, like you were talking about before. But if you're in a non-risky market, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity to save some money on insurance in the next year or so.
Yeah, and Nicole, we've got some stats on those people that intend to switch insurance companies that we'll talk about just here in a moment. But before we do, Layla, it's like, what does the ad market look like for this subcategory?
Sure, Lee. So this category that we have, finance and insurance advertisement, it is out of the 5 recession-proof verticals that we track, it is the #1 most spent. So it has $24.9 billion projections for 2023, with 50.7% going to digital advertisement. On the right-hand side, you can see the share of wallet, and then the #1 spot will go again to direct mail with 25.8%. And we will be looking at auto and direct property insurance in the next slide. We are expecting $5.15 billion spent by the subcategory in 2023, with 51.2% going to digital advertisement. So we can see that this category will grow 13.9% in 23, and then will continue to grow about almost 3% in 24. So pretty reliable subvertical here.
Yeah, there's growth in this one in 2024, albeit it's smaller growth than in 2023 substantially. So let's go to the next slide on audience insight then. For auto insurance switchers in particular, So nearly 10% of US adults say that they want to switch to a better auto insurance provider in the next 12 months. And we call these folks auto insurance switchers. So that's what they are. 38% of auto insurance switchers say that they have a work commute that is 21 to 60 minutes long one way. So they're in their cars quite a bit. 63% say that they would prefer to work with an independently owned agency or business. And then 43% say that they get most of their TV programming from OTT streaming services. So definitely some things then to keep in mind as you're going after auto insurance switchers. 10%, nearly 10% of the market is available right for the picking. And if they find a better option, they're going to take it. Audrey?
So Layla, Corey is asking if your total number is both local and national expenditures combined.
I can jump in there. So the way BIA does our projections, I just wanted to find, I probably should have done that earlier. So thank you, Corey, for your question. What we call local advertising is essentially all dollars that are meant for that market, purposely spent in that local market. So those could be purchased, quote, nationally, like through a rep firm like CATS or whatever, but as long as they are placed in that market. So the best way to think about it, most likely from your perspective, is everything minus network buys. Because network, you're buying, it doesn't matter what, you're buying the impressions, it doesn't matter where they land. And so we exclude network buys from our projections. So what we call local is really your local and national, most likely, excluding network.
Excellent. And just as a side note, I'll state for the record that our sales field team pulled some data in preparation for this webinar. Would you like to guess, Nicole, the average insurance claim against a dog bite? I have the number here in front of me.
Oh my God.
Average insurance claim against a dog
For
bite.
a dog bite.
I'm going with
$49,000.
I'm sorry, what
Holy
was it?
moly.
$49,000.
Oh,
So
twice
anyway,
okay.
with that, let's move on to auto repair.
Well, yeah, and that certainly makes the pet insurance angle make a whole lot more sense when you look at numbers like that.
Just thought I'd share.
Yeah, Nicole and I definitely have thoughts on the automotive industry in 2023, but one thing that we can definitely agree on is that, you know, the subvertical in the automotive category that is definitely going to be hot is auto repair, and for many reasons. Let's go to the next slide. So the reason for this is that right now, next slide, Patrick. There we go. So the average vehicle on the road is over 12 years old. 12 years old. It's like normally it's about 10, but now it's 12. Inventory shortages, which you're all familiar with if you've tried to sell automotive in the last year, you know, are causing vehicle owners to repair what they have rather than shop for new and used vehicles. And when you look at rising interest rates, where that's not making it any easier. So it's definitely been a rough 2 years for auto dealerships. And when you had COVID, then you had inventory shortages, and now you have interest rates on top of that. But what that means is that, yeah, I'm going to keep and repair what I've already got rather than try to go out and try to find another used car or perhaps buy something new. 64% of vehicle owners say that they are apt to sign on when a shop offers a financing plan for repairs. So, you know, one of the questions you want to ask your dealership in particular, or any auto service provider in your market then is like, do they offer a financing plan? And if so, they need to advertise it because of this stat right here from the AdMall Local Account Intelligence Report. Adults 60 plus with an income of $75,000 are the sweet spot for automotive do-it-for-me customers. So these are people that are more likely then to pay for auto service repair rather than go down to the auto parts store, buy some stuff and try to fix it themselves. And something that's near and dear to my heart, electric vehicles are an opportunity for body shops because, yeah, I got to tell you, I had to have some body work done on my EV a few years ago, and it's a totally different animal than regular fixing a regular car, and with different type of equipment necessary. So if you have a body shop that's able to fix electric vehicles or whatever, big advertising opportunity for you. Nicole, what are your thoughts on this category?
Absolutely. And, you know, when I'm looking at this, so auto repair, for me, what I'm seeing here is, as you were saying, the dealerships offer the auto repair, not just about the financing, but with new car sales not being as strong as a lot of these dealerships would like, they were always somewhat reliant on the repair service that was always very profitable for them, even more so now. So what I'm expecting in 2023 is to see more competition between the dealership repair shops, if you will, and the local repair shops, non-affiliated repair shops. And I think there's a real opportunity there for everybody on this webinar in terms of advertising by both of those parties that are going to be competing over these cars that are getting older and older and will need more and more service. The other thing you mentioned was EVs, which I think everybody's coming out with a new EV. So I think there's going to be a lot of new product offerings, if you will, in the course of the next year, which would be helpful. And there's also going to be a need for consumer education around EVs, because they've extended the tax credits, and there's some more information about those, which should hopefully drum up more demand for EVs, and also more advertising around EVs. And I'm sure everybody on this call, I know we're here for recession-proof verticals, but I can't not talk about auto in general because it's such a large and important category for everybody. So I just want to say that in terms of BIA, we are projecting auto to be up about 5% in 2023 compared to 2022. Most of that projection is coming in the back half of the year. So we're expecting the first half of this year of 23 to look similar to the back half of 22. Just not much advertising. It's not back yet. We're starting to see some very early indicators of some 0% finances out there, which are really, really good to see, but not quite, I'm not quite ready to say that auto's on its way back yet. So for anybody curious about auto in general, I think that's a back half than a front half of 23.
Yeah, we tend to agree with you here at Sales Fuel. I mean, we're starting to see the supply chain issues starting to ease a little bit, early signs of it, mind you. And I think for automotive in general, then to really take off, it's all going to be dependent on what happens with interest rates. So, between those two things, I would tend to agree with you. Back half of the year makes the most sense.
Right, and today's news is promising. So let's
totally
see
promising. So we're going to keep an eye on that. So Layla, let's talk about advertising for the automotive repair category.
Sure. So automotive, we are expecting a projection of $12.2 billion for 2023 overall spend, which 56.8% of it will go to digital advertisement. On the right-hand side, we're looking at, again, share of wallet. 25.3% will go to PC or laptop, which will be the #1 spot, and then followed really closely by 18.6% with TV OTA. So you can see how much money is going to TV here. So next slide, we have combined two sub-verticals as we believe auto repair will be big next year, which is tire, automotive parts, and accessory stores, combined with automotive repair services. So we've combined both into one, and we are projecting that 2023 spent will be about $895 million in all TV markets. 61.8% of it will go to digital advertisement. So now that is an increase of 11.3% overall year over year in 2023. And we are expecting about 1.1% increase to 24 in this subcategory. Back to you.
Hey, Patrick, rather than going forward, go backward a slide on this one. I'm going to call an audible. So So Layla, what I find interesting about this is that, of course, the high percentage on digital advertising, when we get ads in our mailboxes, and because direct mail has shown up so high on your top 4 on the other categories, but it doesn't show up high on this one. And it's interesting because, when we get ads in the mailboxes, there are ads in there for, tires and alignment and for oil changes and everything like that. But yet there's mobile and there's digital, and then you have TV OTA and radio OTA, where I find that very interesting.
Absolutely. I think you make a really good point here. They have the #1 spot is on PC laptop, and then you have TV OTA, so very reliant on certain traditional and also more traditional digital mediums. So thank you.
So let's take a look at the audience then for automotive repair. So now we're going to jump ahead 2 slides. There we go. So some additional information on this. 1 in 5 vehicle owners say that they plan to pay for windshield repair or replacement within the next 12 months. So SafeLight, for example, has got to be a major advertiser in your market. 15% of auto service customers say that they plan to pay for getting their car painted or pay for window tinting in the next year. And 49% of auto service customers are more likely than other adults to take action in the past 30 days after hearing a radio commercial. And that's data then from AdMall. So Audrey, over to you.
Yep, we don't have any auto questions, but I'd like to move right into the tech vertical because we do have honorable mention verticals to give you guys more ideas. And I want to make sure in our remaining time left that we get to all the great sales tips that are to come in this webinar. So let's go ahead to tech, Patrick.
So this is one I know Nicole and I are going to have a little bit of discussion about. As I said, technology, BIA is going to focus on internet service providers. I'm going to kind of paint the picture of the technology vertical all the way around. So let's go to the next slide and jump right in. So much has been made about recent tech company layoffs. And I wanted to tell you that this is not indicative of the economic health of the technology sector. Yes, VC money has declined significantly. So you do have that source of revenue has dried up. But when any category has increased their number of employees year after year for at least 10 years, you reach a point where you can easily cut 8 to 10%, of your workforce or whatever, and really not be affected by it, because like you're getting rid of the least productive members of your staff. And also there's other things that they, initiatives that they've taken on over the past 10 years that maybe haven't quite panned out. And so what happens is a tough economy and a quote unquote looming recession then gives them the cover then to be able to make these cuts then without spooking anybody that there's anything wrong with the company because everybody else is doing it. So I would take the tech company layoffs really with a grain of salt, because every one of these layoffs that I've seen has been less than 10% of the workforce, with the exception possibly of Twitter, but which is its own story. We could talk later about that. So what's important to know about this category is that CEOs have actually increased their budgets by 85% in 2022 for digital capabilities, for adding digital capabilities. So that means improving their mobile apps, improving their e-commerce. These are things that are non-negotiable, that have to happen, recession or not. And then also their budgets have increased 77% for all other aspects of IT. So as you can see, there's money being spent here. They're not cutting back. 75% of US consumers also believe that businesses that they associate with will be victims of a cyber attack in the next year. So cybersecurity is something that's going to be something that you're going to be hearing a lot more about, and that's going to need to advertise and promote their services. And a couple categories when we're talking about advertising that are really interesting is that shoppable video ads and live selling on social media are two emerging trends that retailers are using, particularly to be able to use technology then to increase their sales. Nicole, what are your thoughts on technology? Because I know you've got some.
I know that I spent a considerable amount of money over the Thanksgiving holiday looking over the shoulder of my nephew as he's watching TikTok and somebody's live streaming and saying, I want this, Aunt Nicole, and yes, out came my wallet. So that is very real, and it is happening, and it's pretty fascinating. But in terms of technology and where we're headed and what we're looking at here at BIA, so what we're seeing is pretty interesting is the shift. So internet service providers we're pretty excited about, because of all of the technology that's happening these days and all of the streaming and everything like that. So yes, cable companies are losing subscribers, but a lot of those people are moving and they're getting their streaming and their internet in their home from different providers. So we're seeing a lot of competition from, say, Spectrums of the world and everybody that, and your phone service, everybody wants you to use them for your in-home data. And we're going to see a lot of competition there and a lot of spending around that. And again, I don't think people are very loyal when it comes to their internet service provider. So if you can get me a better deal and I'm going to switch from my home phone package over to this DirecTV package or over to that cable package, whatever it is, I think price sensitivity is very important, and that's going to increase the spending in technology as well over the course of the next year. But Layla can take us through the numbers.
Yeah, before we do that, I just may want to add a little point here, is that the cable companies that are not only just selling the internet service, but they're also now they're into mobile, and so right. Selling the wireless services as well. So fierce competition there. So Layla, tell us about how that impacts advertising.
Sure, let's look at the numbers. So the technology vertical, we are expected a 12.6 $8.4 billion spent in 2023, with 61.4% going to digital advertisement. On the right-hand side, you can see number one spot in share wallet goes to mobile with 28.8%, and then TV OTA is about 8.1%. Next slide, we are actually looking at not the top spend, but one of the top spenders in this category, which is internet service providers. We're expecting $3.91 billion spent in 2023, with 56% of it going to digital advertisement. So now that would be a 4.8% increase year over year in 2023, and we're expecting another slight increase of 2.8% by 24. So pretty steady subvertical here. Back to you, Lee. Thank you.
Okay, let's take a look at some audience numbers here for technology. And so small business owners, 49% more likely to want to switch to a new internet service provider in the next 12 months. This is what Nicole was talking about, lack of loyalty. So the small businesses owners in particular, they're not just buying internet or like that, they're buying enterprise packages. You know, they're looking to switch for a better deal if they can get one. 1 in 7 small SMBs have downloaded and read a white paper in the past year. So it's something to keep in mind then when you're working with your business to business folks. 43% of Americans are afraid of opening an email attachment due to cybersecurity concerns. This is data from our audience scan survey that we do every single year. So again, it shows you then what some of the concerns are for tech customers going forward. So Audrey, do we have any questions on this category?
We do not. We're going to go ahead and move into the subvertical honorable mentions that you all put your heads together and came up with. I think, yeah, you
Nicole,
wanted to go
yeah,
through.
Nicole, take it.
Right, so these were a couple more verticals that we couldn't quite spend the bulk of the time on, but wanted to mention. One of them was hobby and toy stores. So again, it's just not a huge vertical, so I didn't, want to put it as a major spotlight, but it is going to grow significantly. That went down a lot over the pandemic. It's really coming back. Hobbies and toy stores and their supply chain issues are starting to ease more quickly than some other sectors. So if you're an account executive looking for something to specialize in, this might be something to look at in your market for the next year to really get your arms around. Pharmaceuticals and medicine manufacturers, this was mentioned briefly under hospitals. During the pandemic, there were a lot of drugs that were being tested by the FDA that were in clinical trials, and all of those trials stopped immediately. So when we all shut down, all of those drug trials stopped. And then when things started to open back up, the drug trials started to open back up. So the FDA has this backlog of drugs that they're approving, not related to COVID, but are coming to the market now. And a lot of these manufacturers need to make their money back, as quickly as possible and get more money into their R&D before their patents run out. So pharmaceuticals, very heavy spending for 23, and very heavy spending in digital. I think OTT is going to be big for that one as well. And the last one is performing arts companies. So everybody in their local markets, I'm in New York, and what I'm seeing is that Broadway is unfortunately not coming back in the way that it was before. But what I am seeing is that all of these shows are traveling. So all the Broadway shows used to be just a couple every year that traveled. Now most of them are traveling and they're hitting every market. And so that means that every time a show comes to a market, they need to advertise. And so partnering as your station or your, whether radio, television, whatever you are, cable, partner with your performing arts companies and the Performing Arts Center to get ahead of all of those shows that are coming in the course of the next year, work things out, obviously, win tickets. There's a really great opportunity there for advertising from partnerships with performing arts companies over the course of the next year as well. But I know we've got even more to get through.
Well, that one goes a little bit against conventional wisdom, doesn't it? Because it's like, normally I would think during a recession or whatever that the arts community tends to suffer a little bit. So what are your thoughts on that?
Right, but it's the travel. So this is that weirdness with this recession that people don't really want to travel in New York or to big cities, and these really quality performances are coming to their towns. And so, I want a night out. And also it's kind of inflation proof. Like, okay, I can't go on vacation, but maybe I can take my family to see Hamilton down the street. I can actually afford that. It's a big deal. Instead of going to New York and seeing Hamilton, which, then becomes 40 times more expensive if you're lucky.
And so Nicole and I had a very spirited discussion, pun intended, about this yesterday when we were talking about this slide. Two categories that we see historically, though, are very strong. during a recession are alcoholic beverages. So I'm thinking about in terms of any local breweries you have or local distilleries that you have. Alcohol consumption then tends to go up during a recession, but this one's a little bit different. Nicole has some thoughts on that. Legal
Yeah,
services is another thing that tends to go up during a recession as well. So
Right.
those are two that didn't quite make this slide, but I think should have made this slide.
You know, I don't disagree with you on alcohol. The reason why it's not on this slide is because it never stopped. So, you know, it's not necessarily growing. I think alcohol did well during the recession. There was an increased consumption. There was an increase in advertising, and that has maintained. So it's not really going to show crazy year-over-year growth, which is why it wasn't a necessarily growing vertical, but it is steady and healthy, if you will. And then the same thing on the lawyers. So, I mean, that's been a little more wonky, a little more up and down. But it is true that, you know, legal spending is healthy and will remain healthy in 2023. As people work on estate planning, especially succession planning, you know, again, that goes with the populations and some of that. I think that's kind of the legal services that will be focused on in 23.
Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think you got some tips for us, right, Lee?
Oh yeah, so what I wanted to do is that here at Sales Fuel, one of the things that we do is we provide tactical business intelligence for making sales. But also it's like, you know, we are veterans of the media sales business. And so we've been through some of these recessions in the past. So I wanted to give you 7 tips for selling in a soft economy. And I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to breeze right through these, and you can then take the slides and use them afterwards. Number one, most important thing is to focus on retention, focus on relationships. During tougher economic times, salespeople that you have that are transactional, that haven't actually built a friendship, a relationship then with your accounts and everyone, they're the ones that struggle, because you're going to make more of your sales than by selling more to people that already know and love you and believe that you work for them. So the transactional salespeople will tend to struggle. You know, recessions tend to really separate the real salespeople from the people that are just, you know, in the business of sales. And also because of that, new salespeople that maybe don't have a book of business or don't have established relationships also tend to struggle in this. So it's like you may want to take a look at your comp programs. You may want to take a look at mentoring and giving them a little bit longer runway if it turns out to be that the economy is pretty soft in 2023. The way to do this is to make sure the buyers see you as someone who knows what they're talking about and knows how to help. That sales credibility. And another thing to keep in mind is be on the lookout that larger competitors will come downstream. People then that are much bigger than you, who you would never think they would come down to Sioux Falls, for example, you know, to try to take business out of your market and something like that, suddenly are. So it's something to be on the lookout for. Next slide, number 2, is arm advertisers with justification for their marketing spend, because this is going to be called into question. So you have to be able to overcome the objection. You can't force the market. Well, it's not about forcing a market. There actually is a market that's there, and consumer spending then has not gone in the dumpster at all. 23% of adult shoppers also believe that stores that advertise are typically better than ones that do not. So if you're not advertising, you're out of sight, out of mind, but also perceived that as not being as good as the other stores that are advertising. Competitors who are reducing their ad spend is an opportunity to gain market share. And a way in which you do this is that you don't go and try to take away 100% of the business. You try to nibble a little bit at the edges or whatever. And it's like, hey, just take 10% of your budget or whatever and spend it here. And then you work so well for them and you service them so well that you get the majority of the spend. So, you know, use the marketing research for BI and AdMall to help show them the justification for the spend. Co-op advertising funds are will expand their budgets, particularly as we see inventories spending going up. Co-op advertising can expand the budgets. You can help your accounts amplify their value prop towards saving money by advertising essential needs, tying into manufacturing promotions, buy now, pay later, or financing options. Number 5, the next slide. Sell employment advertising. Really? Yes, employment advertising, particularly in the area of manufacturing, transportation, logistics, anything in the service industries, healthcare. Absolutely, there's opportunities for you there. You need to increase your return on ad spend as quickly as possible, because the buyer's patience will be shorter, and they will pull the plug a little bit quicker than they have in the past. So emphasize your omni-channel proposals. Yes, definitely sell your higher profit media products, but also include SEO, OTT, digital video, content marketing, especially for B2B. And the number 7 item is to tell everyone you know, look, you don't cut what makes you money. All right, so advertising with us generates leads, generates new customers, and that's exactly what you need right now in a soft economy. So that's my 7 tips for selling in a soft economy. Let's go to the next slide.
Thanks,
And Audrey,
Lee.
take it away.
Yeah, my co-host of our Manage Smarter podcast, long running now. And get this, our latest episode, everyone, Jeb Blount, his book, Selling in a Crisis or a Slight Recession, if you want to say. Please go listen to it on any major podcast outlet. You can also share it, subscribe, rate, and review it. That was a very fun discussion with him, and he had some very interesting things to share. Next slide, Patrick. And if you like the research and sales intelligence and consumer data we provided today, and you do not have our AdMall product, please try our 2-week trial. Actually, go back to one slide. Our AdMall product is long running and perennial. Well, okay, these are out of order. That's no problem. And then the Sales Cred app, level the playing field against your sales competition with the free download of our brand new app. It's free, build credibility with buyers via customized tips, measures your sales mindset, your skill set, and knowledge. And for Cyber Week, we've extended our promotion. Download the app now in Google Play or the Apple Store. Get a free meeting prep report with the promo code GETPREP. That'll help you go out and prospect. And BIA also has some things they'd like to share with all of you in terms of some solutions out there. Let me do the handoff. And there's the AdMall slide. We'll blow through that.
And on the next, so you'll see, I mean, what we've been talking about is that 2023 is going to be up, it's going to be down, it's going to change. Things are going to change. Everything we talked about today is ever evolving and constantly changing. So what my advice to you is, stick with us, stay with BIA. We will be with you along the way. We evolve and update our forecast 3 to 4 times a year. I'm available anytime you want to talk about anything. If you've got a specific market you want to talk about, we've got information on the markets and everything, but stay with us. So reach out to us at advantage@bia.com to discuss just ways that we can get involved. And one other thing, I know on the next slide, there are a lot of account executives and salespeople on this call today. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because I think it's really exciting and important. It's the vertical ed report. So for example, today, we went through automotive or education. We have a very extensive, deep report. We're talking way more than 10 pages that would help you to become an expert in any one of these verticals and the sub verticals. And I think really that's what's going to make you recession proof in your selling in the next year, is be that expert, have the actionable insights that your clients need. And we can help you with that. And we've got, along the lines of the Cyber Monday sale, we've got our vertical reports on sale for you guys, just for this audience, just today. Well, more than just today, but just for this audience. Vertical 99 is the is the discount code to get your vertical report for $99. I encourage you to do that as well. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Patrick, who's going to land this plane and be done with it. There you go.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I would like to thank everybody again for joining us today. It was a really good discussion. As we said before, there's a lot of questions that we didn't get to. We'll be sure to follow up with you separately afterwards, and also be looking out for that email tomorrow from BIA with links to the on-demand webinar, as well as the PDF of the slide deck. And as I mentioned earlier too, as you leave, if you could please just take a few minutes to fill out the survey on your way out to let us know what you thought of today's webinar and give us some feedback. We'd really appreciate it. So if you just go ahead and take care of that, we'd like to thank everybody again and have a great day.